bad calls, I would challenge, is it a bad call or is it a call that you don't want to see because it's against your team? What does bad mean?
Welcome to the Sports Backdrop, where we use sports as a backdrop for way bigger conversations. That includes discussing the latest trends and developments in the world of sports. I am your host, Eric Kazmov. This podcast exists because of the team at CASCM. At CASCM, we make content creation enjoyable. We are on a mission to help leaders create content that will improve lives, content to be proud of, content that fosters community. We know through firsthand experience how content brings people together, and we love helping make that happen. We produce podcasts, short form videos, blog posts, and other written works, while also providing support in website development, social media management, and strategic planning. And we would be excited to help you. Visit CASCM.com to learn more, or feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn or Twitter. Yesterday, I had this guy to come to my house. He watches baseball, Cleveland Guardians fan, and he's from Ohio. My dad's from Cleveland. He comes out of the car. He's like, hey, the Guardians are doing awesome, right? And then I mentioned to him how Shane Bieber, the pitcher, was out for the season with Tommy John surgery, like after his first start. I think he maybe started to the second game and then he was done for the season. And he's like one of the best pitchers in baseball. So his season's cut short a bit. So then it brings up the conversation, athletes, about like, how are they throwing their arms out? And these kids are throwing arms out in middle school and high school. They're having this surgery at a very early age. He starts going down this path of when his kids are playing high-level baseball, he was growing up, or when his kids were growing up, that this was happening. And he just went there. He's like, these coaches and these parents are, I don't want to use the word crazy, but that's kind of, he's just talking. It's just conversation. It's outside. He's like, it's crazy what's going on. He's like, I don't understand it because there's all these expectations placed on these kids that they're all going to the bigs. They're all going to the big leagues. They're all going to be playing Major League Baseball at some point. And he's like, there's a lot of good kids out there. He's like, but they're throwing these kids' arms out at such a young age. Now, that's baseball, but it applies to all sports. So you hear about basketball and AAU ball, these kids are playing 8 games in a weekend, right? There's all sorts of conversation around that. Then you have the parents that are involved. And a lot of times parents might think, and you can talk to me about this, that the more they push them to do and the better that they play, that's the thing that's going to lead them. That's what's going to take them to the next step. There's so much in that, right? There's injuries, there's parent involvement. I've watched parents on the sidelines ripping coaches from across the field. I've seen talk to them after the game. I've seen them get kicked out of the field because they were giving the refs a hard time. I've seen it at every level, from 12U soccer to 10U house league hockey, pick a sport, football, and they all have their own dynamics to it. And then I've seen kids cry because they know what's coming next, a car ride home. And then there's also kids who continue to push themselves, like high achievers. They want to push it. Maybe it's nothing to do with the parents, and the parents are only there to support. So I'm not sitting here calling and judging all. I'm more looking at it from the mental health standpoint of what all is going on there. So there's a lot to unpack just in that, but it just thought of it because of what he was saying. And it brought me back to this time in baseball. And then you like Little League baseball. And then there's daddy ball. And who's the best? This kid's got into that challenge team. And this has got to happen. You don't do this. Why didn't you catch that pop fly? I worked on that pop fly all weekend. How did you not catch it? It's a lot. It's a lot. So I can think through it. I can sit with it. But then I can ask you about it because you're a professional in this space. So take that in any direction you want.
I think the lack of information and perspective about what it takes to actually go to the big leagues or a professional level is so misinformed. I think that, like, if I was to ask anybody on the Roots about how do you become a professional, like if a young man or young boy or a young girl goes up to them and says, like, hey, I want to be like you, the last thing they're going to say is the skills. Yes, you got to develop the talent, the physical skills, but what do you believe in? What is your character? How do you treat people? How do you interact? Because in the end, when you get higher and higher, whether it's transitioning from high school and club to college or semi-pro, pro, each of those transitions requires another level of maturity and like emotional intelligence that makes you stand out and give you the edge beyond the next person who's actually right there with you too. How you communicate, how you show up, what, like, you could be the best player out there, and pardon my French, but you could be an asshole and you're not going to make it. So when parents and coaches finally realize that that's what you should be modeling and like allowing the young person to develop into the best person they can be, you're going to be able to express yourself in your sport in a way that you can look in the mirror and be proud of and not be scared about what someone's going to say to you. You know, it's so important that these young people feel like they matter beyond their sport and that their parents can be proud of them for who they are, not what they do over and over and over again. Old school parenting and coaching around the grind, around we got to just keep doing this. We got to just keep insisting and persisting without the awareness and perspective of how that could be also harmful. These days, I like to talk about the difference between grinding and gritty. Being gritty, having grit. Grinding is, like I just explained, something that you just keep doing no matter how you feel. Gritty is being aware of how things impact you and being ready to respond and be equipped to handle tough moments, adversity, and know what you need to be well, to be good, because the mind and body connection is real. If you are not tending to your mind, how you feel, and I'm not saying, so there's this big thing too of like coaches say like, well, if I ask them how they feel, then am I tiptoeing around their response? Then thus they can't play. So I had this example in a coaching training where a coach was like, yeah, well, if I ask them how they feel and they say they're like feeling unmotivated or stressed out, like, what do I do with that? Like, I'm like, well, you support it and be curious and understand what that is. You don't just say like, sit the bench then because that's how you're feeling. Our emotions don't prohibit us from expressing ourselves in our sport. They actually can help us if properly tended to. So the curiosity might come in the form of, I hear you're stressed and feel unmotivated right now. Like, do you feel like, on a scale of 1 to 10, where are you at? 10 being, oh, I'm severely that. And then how do you want to cope with it? So if you're 10, but your coping skills are 10 also, then hey, you might be cool. It might simply just be a feeling like, you asked me how I felt, coach. This is how it is. I'm still ready to go. It has nothing to do with it. I think coaches feel like they have to tend to it or fix it or heal it or do something. Coaches are very proud about like, I know my kids. I know what they need. I know. I was like, but when it comes to emotions, there's some kind of block. But I think because coaches feel like they have to fix it, take it on, in my opinion, the emotional well-being, mental health, you are providing that and being in that by the relationship that you have. But if it goes beyond your scope and role, know that you have people around you. Your athletic trainer, there's a level of training that they have around mental health, having a mental performance coach or a clinical professional around you, even as a consultant, to ask the questions, to have the resource, and then go back and take it to your team. I think that's good. We all do this together.
Does the fixing thing come from like those leadership roles? Like maybe it's masculinity almost to some degree, because it could be a man or woman coach, like a need to fix. Like you said, I got to tend to this right now. Because that's an interesting thing that you said. Like someone's going through something. That doesn't mean they can't they can't cope with it.
Right.
And then they can go and play.
Or it's low level, right? It's like an emotional, like, I'm feeling like this right now situationally because I have this big exam tomorrow. Like you asked me how I'm feeling, I'm telling you, but like on a scale of 1 to 10, maybe it's a 2 or a 3 and I'm good. That's who I am right now. Let's go. Like I can still play. My emotions don't keep me from doing what I do.
There's been a word that's come about a lot with the CEO of NVIDIA. I don't know if you've seen the clip about resilience. He's like, I wish for you pain and suffering. I can't teach resilience, but I need resilience. I need resilience in the company. I need resilience in you because things are going to go wrong. So it's how you deal with that. What kind of resiliency do you have to then continue to go for?
The way I think about resilience is adversity, discomfort, pain even are an opportunity for us to build resilience. We are going to experience some level of that in our lives, in our sport. And so we need to have mindful and skillful responses to adversity, those tough moments, tough seasons. And that's what builds resilience. So I think so many people are like, oh, this is hard. And if you can develop the growth mindset of any moment of adversity or challenge is an opportunity for you to learn about yourself and then grow, that's an important thing to develop. It's not an easy thing to develop. It's not natural. This society, we want to always feel comfortable and good in general. And so that is emphasized around us in our media, the way we speak, the way we intake and consume content around us. It's such a brainwash of like, you're doing something wrong if you don't feel good all the time. So untrue. Like for our kids and our parents to expect that we or they are going to be perfect is such a pressure that is not needed. I don't think we need to suffer. I was just talking to Myra Sack this morning in a podcast interview. She's an incredible woman, deals with grief. She says suffering is the resistance to pain, not pain itself. That's what she told me. You're trying to fight the feeling of pain when we need to move through it. We need to experience it. There's value in that. We don't want to numb it, pretend it's not there, push it down. But I think it's like lack of education, but arrogance around like, I'm going to do this very comfortably. And I'm going to look very comfortable and competent in it. I think a lot of the collegiate athletes I work with, especially the women, are like, I want to look like I know what I'm doing. I want to look competent. And this is an interesting thing too, in front of other players. But I had a collegiate athlete say, like, in front of boys who might be watching, there's so much to think about when you're performing. And the work is making sure that you don't let that distract you from what you're supposed to be doing. You acknowledge it, recognize it, and then we move. There's always going to be a distraction, whether it's outside you or inside you, your own talk, your own thoughts. But like staying locked in, so important, and knowing how to do that. And that varies from human to human, athlete to athlete about how we do that. But resilience is something you develop. And we can't be resilient without going through the tough times. And so, and expecting that there will come and not blaming yourself when they do. You're not doing anything wrong when tough times come. What could be quote unquote wrong is not taking it as an opportunity to learn and then apply that learning next time you're in that situation.
Yeah. Going to that example of a ref making a bad call in a, let's say, high school soccer game, and the parents respond to that. That's almost trying to make it better for their kids. Their kid doesn't have to suffer because, let's say in softball, strike was called when it shouldn't have been a strike, but you're going to lay into it. But that kid had to go through that because there's going to be good calls and bad calls throughout their entire career, whether it's sports or life, right? Things are just not going to go your way.
And in the end, Eric, the kid is so embarrassed and mortified by their parent doing that. The parent, I think the athlete actually gets this better than the parent most of the time, and because it's work. Because you want to protect. We are both parents. We want to protect, have our kids have a smooth ride. We don't want them to go through stuff. When we realize that they need to, that's when the shift can change. And, in baseball and softball, each ump is going to have their own strike zone. And you have to learn that and know that that's going to happen. Game to game, that changes. Even at the high levels, every ump is different. Every blue is different. And so to hem and haw about something that's out of your control doesn't do anything for anyone. There are so many, my girl plays softball, so many moments when her teammates are so absolutely mortified because it's developmental to care extremely about who's looking at them, what they're saying about them. Like there's such a hypersensitivity to that, their physicality. And so it actually takes the player outside of their area of comfort to a point where they can't perform because they're managing like these extra set of emotions that are definitely not needed and not necessary.
Does that come from watching parents on the sidelines react or minimizing what took place on the field after the game? Like, you could use this as an example. Maybe the coach took the player off of the game. Coach shouldn't have done that. You're all of a sudden like saying that coach made a mistake.
People need to stay in their lane. They need to pay attention and worry about themselves, not anybody else. You put your kid on this team and the coach is going to coach, whether you like what they're coaching or not. Your role is to parent. Their role is to coach. I know most teams have initial paperwork at the beginning of the season, 24 to 48 hours cool off zone before or period before a parent can even talk to a coach about what they thought happened or didn't happen. If you want to coach, then sign up to be a coach. Your kid does not need you to be questioning the authority in their sport in front of them because it undermines everything. Like, just, you and I laugh, but like, yeah, chill out and like know who you are and what you're doing and how you impact people. You know, what you do and say matters. We don't want our kids to feel mortified and embarrassed. Like, let the coaches coach and you do you.
Yeah. What is going on to get parent or guardian to go to that point?
Well, in the end, I mean, at the core is we want to protect. We want to protect our children, our dependents. And it's like there is no space to separate how we feel about maybe a perceived diss or disrespect or like them getting the short end of the stick. What needs to happen, you know, and this is key to emotional intelligence. This is key to mindfulness, to parenting in a proactive way, in a thoughtful way, in an aware way, is regulating your emotions. Just because that's what you feel initially doesn't mean that you need to act on that. Shoot, if I acted on every emotion I had about how I felt like my kid or kids were treated, I'd be up in the office every day. But I have a right to feel my emotions. I also have a responsibility to understand them, be aware of them, and act accordingly. I have control over my kids, not them. There's a sort of unjust situation that happens with them. I'm talking to my kid first before any adult in the realm of sport or school. I want to understand what they went through, what they need. Because again, if I go into, and this is a fact, if I go into my son's school and talk to the teacher, he will be very embarrassed by that. Because there's going to be some aspect of, oh, his peer saw his mom go in maybe over here and like, what was that about? And it's just, it clips them at the knees around giving them the skill to navigate and communicate with these adults. That is an important skill for our kids to learn. I don't want your first way of coping to be going to an adult. I need you to try a couple times, to sort it yourself, to have a conversation with your friend, and then go. If that maybe second or third option. I don't want them to feel like that's the only way something external is going to help them through a situation. But I think the parent, you know, again, jumping back to that is they want to protect. That's really at the core. And so our sort of fight or flight, sort of physiological reaction, emotional reaction, psychological reaction to an unjust situation is we got to protect. Okay, so anyone who's doing my kid wrong, I'm going to go in there and like do something about it. When all we need to do is kind of notice where we're at. Not all what we need to do, but we need to practice on noticing where we're at, taking that breath, getting some distance from it, and then doing something after that. What you do after that is very different than what you would do if you didn't take that time. It's not all danger. That's what our body's saying though. Danger, danger, your kid's being threatened or like, and so it's like, like, oh my God, oh my God. But if we're like, is that really what it is? Like, I know that's what I feel, but is that really what it is? And was that the intention? And move from there.
Yeah. I've seen it, I've done this. So go to a game and the yelling at the ref and the yelling at the kid that you think tripped the player on your team, right? Whatever that might be. And I think removing yourself from it is already diffuses a situation that's inevitably going to happen because there's going to be bad calls. Like I would tell my son, we watch the NFL on Sundays. It's the biggest league in the world. And they make bad calls every single quarter, sometimes constantly. So how do you think that in a middle school or high school or collegiate game that there's not going to be bad calls? Of course there are. But as a parent, I think removing yourself a little bit from the situation, not leaving the game, but just moving yourself down the field, let's say, is a really good thing. And I brought the AirPods in because I talked to someone who runs a very large lacrosse league, lacrosse balls, and they also coach. And they talked to the parents and they said, you need to keep your mouth shut. And if you can't, go listen to music, go listen to a podcast, listen to a book, and don't say anything. And I think that there's something in that because you just don't allow yourself to get to that point. Because you used the word before we started talking is self-awareness. If you know you're the type that's going to blow up, are you self-aware enough to say, I don't want to do this. So how can I stop myself from doing this? And you can remove yourself from the situation.
No, for sure. I mean, I think self-awareness. I mean, and he doesn't, I'm just going to clarify. If my husband was doing all that, I would tell him to shut the fuck up. We have to have accountability to each other as parents, guardians around our kids and know the harm that it can cause. I think that's important. Like you yelling is not, they don't even hear you. You're just embarrassing yourself. The kid doesn't hear you. And if they do, they're embarrassed too. And so why are you doing this? Why is that important? How can you separate yourself? I mean, I think coaches, and this come up a lot, written expectations at the beginning of a season about not just player conduct, but parent conduct. Reading about this is what we stand for. This is what we don't stand for. We can't have this. This is not helpful. This is helpful. And then they sign it so that it can be referred back to when that happens. Like at the level that my daughter plays right now, coaches they recruit the family, not just the player, because I don't want quote unquote drama, because I know the impact of that across, it becomes a domino effect. And so setting the standard at the beginning about what is okay and what isn't and what's expected is super important. And I think back to your point about like bad calls, I would challenge, is it a bad call or is it a call that you don't want to see because it's against your team? What does bad mean? And all referees, all sports, all levels, all umpires, all officials are human beings themselves. They're doing the best they can. They're trying to, call a game that is fair and accurate. So they're not out there saying, "Oh, I'm gonna make like 10 bad calls today. Like that's cool. I'm gonna do that." They're not doing that. They see what they see, with their team. They couldn't corroborate. Some have VAR, blah, blah, blah. But like, they're not trying to do a bad job. This is their profession. This is their living. They want to feel proud about it. So questioning what is a bad call, why you think it's that, and could you keep it to yourself possibly?
Yeah. So we've talked a lot about high level athletes. All athletes start somewhere. And there's a big conversation going on about playing multiple sports. So when kids are young, they'll try all sorts of sports. So let's say by the time they're early teens, they've dabbled in a lot of sports. But they're a well-rounded athlete. But they're on a team at this point that kids started playing when they were 5, 6, 7 years old. So they have 6 years of experience. Maybe they played at a high level. But they're so far behind. So professional athletes, and I would imagine a lot of players for the Roots, for example, would say, go play multiple sports, go play baseball, go play basketball, go do dance, go do track, whatever. Problem becomes when a kid is so far behind, at least for that moment, not in the future, because we don't know what's going to happen in the future, but in that moment, they feel less than and perhaps don't want to continue playing that sport because all they see is, this person's really good. I'm down here. How am I ever going to make up this difference? You and I know if they put effort into it and all this, their growth is going to be exponential because this kid's already been tracking up slowly but surely so you can get there. But it's very difficult because this is very complex. Coaches oftentimes calm out a little bit because it can be done. They want to win. Parents want to win. I don't want the kid who's got inexperience being on that field or the ice, whatever, because they're not helping our team win at this point. I think there's a disconnect possibly with catering to young elite athletes that look like they have a great potential to go wherever they're going to go, with the kid that maybe doesn't have the same kind of experience quite yet. Yeah, the professional athletes are all saying, go play multiple sports. At some point, you're going to have to, whatever the word is, specialize, or if you have big plans and you're going to play D1 basketball, and you're like, by the time you're probably a sophomore in high school, most likely you're going to be focusing on one. But at the same time, you go talk to some of the big recruiters at the big football programs, they demand that you go play track and field, demand that you go play one of the other sports to help you with those things.
I think that there's, again, misinformation and a lack of value to the fact that you being a high-level elite youth athlete has everything to do with your ability to physically perform. If the coaches are evaluating just that, it's incomplete. So true story, when my daughter, when she was in 8, she tried out for like sort of the competitive league in softball. She was the worst physical skilled player there. The girls had been playing for years, the same scenario. At 8, they've been playing for years. So she jumped over from martial arts. She self-selected both martial arts and softball. The coach chose her because of her effort and her coachability. She was the worst player physically on that team. She did not get a hit until the last tournament of the season. She was an out. The coach kept giving her chances. She bat ninth, maybe not every game. She would be in right field where she doesn't get the ball, but she's out there. My girl would go to every practice, never late, keep us on time, try her hardest. Fast forward, she's being actively recruited to play collegiate softball at high academic schools because she's a high performing student as well. She's very clear that softball is part of who I am, not all of who I am. I want to be in a place surrounded by other student athletes and students who appreciate and want to learn. She needs a community to do that, is what she's saying. And so we're not going D1. She would probably run the bench, D1, and have softball in her life too much. D2, D3, small school that values community, social justice, all of that. My point is, and those same girls, predominantly those same girls who she started with at age 8 and 9, are not playing in college. For whatever reason. I can't say why not. But when you are given that chance, and like it was painful for me. I felt bad a lot of times. I felt bad for her, the team. She's not contributing. But no one gave up on her. She kept doing it. I literally cried when she got her first hit. I cried, like bawled. Like I was so happy for her. I don't think she even realized what it meant, because it meant something to me that was different than what it meant to her. She's like, I'm just going to run. I hit the ball, I'm going to run. I'm like, girl, like the work and persistence and everything you've done to get here is like something. That's like not something little. And so as long as she has fun, because that's the thing I want to stress about youth sports, the love for movement, the love for physical activity, the love for being around your teammates in your sport. That is the key for us as parents and coaches to keep emphasizing. It's not to develop, a professional athlete, because what's going to happen is they're going to fall out of love of the game, get burnt out, and not see it as a space that actually includes them. The goal in youth sports, even when you can get, maybe if you want to play competitively, or you still got to have fun. You got to love the game. You got to love playing your game. And if you fall out of love, you can fall back in. You got to prioritize that. And you got to play for yourself, not anyone else. And have spaces to be able to do that. Like for me, I want to be mom to my kid. I'm going to put her in front of sports psychology professionals, her personal trainer, her hitting and defensive coaches, her acupuncturist, her hypnotherapist. And these are real people. Like we've put these in front of her over her lifetime. Because I want to be mom. I want to love on her. I want to like tell her she's amazing no matter what she does. Like I want to like be that safe person that's not going to judge her day in and day out for what she didn't do. They don't need that. And so I know I'm humble enough to know and have the wherewithal to know that I can't develop her by myself. I need other professionals and a village, as they say, like other people to come in behind her to help her be that person.
Takes a village. Again, in the professional levels, if you look at the NBA and there's 30 teams, they all can't be the best coach. They all can't have that way about them. And I think if you take that down to this level, I mean, I think anybody that's given their time and effort deserves a lot of credit. So I heard this one story, and it was a guy we were actually doing a podcast with. We developed a relationship, and he grew up, this Black man, and he would always blame it that I didn't do this or I didn't get that because I'm Black. His dad said, don't get mad at the work you didn't do. It's like, that's good.
This is the sum, though, of that. Control the controllables. You cannot control how a coach picks their roster. You cannot control the politics or behind the scenes that go on in those choices. They are subjective. Coach does not ever have to explain why they cut someone or why they didn't. So the best lesson we can teach our kids about that is we're going to be dealing with this all of our lives. And we need to teach our kids that there's going to be so many situations where you're not going to like the decision. You're not going to like the situation. But what can you do about it? Not because you did something wrong, but again, how do you learn from this? How do you know what's in your control and what isn't? How do you move and exercise that control and take accountability and look inward about what you could have done differently? You're always learning about yourself. We're not externalizing it and blaming it on the fact that we're Black or the fact that we're too short or the fact that that coach didn't like me or the fact that he liked this other person better because of their sister of the blah blah. You could go on and on about like the reasons why you think it happened. That doesn't get you anywhere. What do you need to do to show that you are aware of what's in your control, like the effort, like putting in the work, like continuing to train your body and your mind to learn about your own mental health and what mental health is and how mental performance coaches can also help coaches. Our top 3 clients as mental performance consultants / coaches, because we can consult with the coach. We don't have to give them mental performance coaching. We can consult on them about these are the tools and skills you can use. This is how you learn about your players as human beings first and foremost. Then they can go out and coach with that learning. But our top 3 clients are teams, the athlete, and the coaches. And so being able to know that everyone needs a little bit of help and understanding and education about how performance and overall well-being can be implemented in a sport team, the sport ecosystem is key. It's almost like, in my opinion now, it's like coaching with like one arm. It's like you're keeping yourself from a resource that can be really helpful because you're scared of it or there's stigma or you don't understand it. Well, then ask. We can explain it. But like, I think when people come to it is when they have their own personal experience about mental health or like the clinical side, like depression, anxiety, actually being able to have the diagnosis and still thrive within it, to be healthy. But also like I went through mental performance crisis that led my mental health to decline a little bit through an injury or being cut or blah, blah, that I think people just need. Everyone needs a little bit of an edge and a leveling up. If that has to include knowing the mental side of things.
In case you haven't noticed, we love podcasts. In fact, we love building podcasts, everything from development to production. Because of all that, we're building a one-of-a-kind podcast network. If you have a podcast or looking to launch a new podcast, then we should talk. You can message me on Twitter at Eric_Kaz or hit us up any way that works for you. Let's talk about your podcast joining this one-of-a-kind podcast network.